Alrighty then. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. We have a great presentation for you tonight. Compliments of our guest speaker, Joseph Fagan. Joseph Fagan is the fifth generation of his family to grow up in the Oranges. He currently works as the Township Public Information Officer and was appointed as the Honorary West Orange Township Historian in 2012. He hosted a cable TV show about West Orange history and is both a writer and an author. His weekly newspaper column ran for 15 years in the West Orange Chronicle, and he has written 4 books on the history of West Orange. Fagan has given numerous historical presentations for the West Orange Public Library, civics groups, and organizations, and he was appointed to the New Jersey State Historical Commission by Governor Murphy in January 2024. And we're so pleased to have Joseph Fagan joining us tonight to give us a presentation on the construction of Interstate 280. With that, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Richie. It's an honor and pleasure to be here tonight. And I'd like to welcome you, all your members, and all those in the Zoom audience to tonight's presentation. I also should point out that we tried scheduling this on a few prior dates and we weren't able to work it out, but here we are tonight. So I'm going to try to share my screen. This worked perfect in can you see my screen?
Yep, as soon as you go into presentation mode, you should be all set.
Okay. I'm going to start over.
Okay. Perfect. You're all set.
Okay, you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, great. So once again, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here. I grew up in West Orange and I witnessed the construction of I-280 in the 60s and the 70s, not really understanding what I was seeing. But as I became older, and became a driver on I-280, I certainly came to appreciate what had happened here. Now, tonight's presentation is it's going to be the story of I-280 construction. It's primarily going to be focused on West Orange because when I made this, that's what I was focused on. But it will cover the history. It will cover the complete history of the highway. So often we travel the roads of home and we kind of take for granted the roads that we're on and not really understand or appreciate their origin. So hopefully after tonight's presentation, I can guarantee you that you will never look at 280 the same. So the outline of tonight's program, there actually are, I want you to understand 2 objectives, really 3 objectives. The first and most important objective is I want everything to go along without any problems tonight. But there is a strategic objective, and that was to expand the highway from Newark through the Oranges and connect with Interstate 80 in Parsippany. And for those of you who might not be aware, Interstate 80 begins in Fort Lee after the George Washington Bridge and is a cross-country route, and it ends at the Oakland Bay Bridge in San Francisco Bay. One problem they had, which can be classified as a tactical objective, was the mountains of West Orange stood directly in the path of 280. So tonight we're going to I'd like to explore these key elements, examine the need for the east-west thruway, follow the project as it transformed from a very small highway to an actual interstate, and understand what transpired to the development of the proposed route, the proposed route, and take a deep dive into the construction process in West Orange itself. There are 73 slides you can see in the lower right-hand corner. I have it as a mile marker, kind of like a clever little thing I thought of. So you can see where we are in terms of progress of the presentation. The genesis of 280 for the concept of when the concept for today's National Interstate Highway System began was actually first reported to Congress in 1939. And that's when in 1949, a landmark I'm sure you're all very familiar with. The William A. Stickle Bridge was built over the Passaic River connecting Harrison to Newark, and it opened as a 1.1 mile highway. Now, it's hard to really think of 1.1 miles as a highway, but that's how it began. And it was classified as New Jersey 25A. And William A. Stickle, by the way, was a engineer, was a county engineer for Essex County. I had come across this brochure a while ago, and I have it in my 280 archives, and it's a 1948 booklet promoting the need for the east-west freeway in Essex County. It really kind of is, in my estimation, a sales brochure, and I think it was designed to really sell the concept of a east-west freeway in the Oranges. And it's interesting here that this came out in 1948, but you can see the member boards listed, and they're practically every town in Essex County. And what I find interesting about that is that there really was no route chosen yet. So these towns were kind of on board, not knowing if if the east-west freeway was actually going to affect their town or not. And in the forward of this brochure, it mentions April 26, 1946, as a it mentions that date, that as soon as practical, there will be a state highway system, a new freeway extending from West Orange eastwardly through the Oranges, East Orange and Newark, to a connection with the aforementioned Route 25A. Now, it says as soon as practical, but in reality, it was 26 years away. But this sort of laid the groundwork for what was to come. And it also mentions the highway as being 25A, New Jersey 25A. As part of the brochure, it has this chart inside it, and it lists these statistics, and I'm not really sure where these statistics came from, but they had some sort of formula in there where they took the vehicle units times the road mileage equals the daily vehicle miles, and Essex County came up with 2,908,000 over 2 million, almost 3 million. And I think this is a self-serving statistic, but it really did serve the purpose to drive home the point of the congestion that was taking place in Essex County. And there were further documentation in the booklet that shows how 280 in Essex County in particular was congested because of traffic, and it mentions that it was 14 miles from Newark to Midtown Manhattan, but the 6 miles to West Orange took much longer to go that distance. I'm sorry, I'm just having a little technical problem here. The booklet mentioned that they wanted the state to be as much interested in making highway travel convenient from West Orange to Newark as between Morristown and West Orange. So the booklet was put out, and they were trying to get everybody involved. They were throwing everything out there to garner the public interest. Here you can see a map that was in there, and it shows some bypass routes. And why there was congestion in Essex County. Again, this is 1948, so we're not even into the 1950s yet. And the congestion in Essex County and the east-west passage, that all needed to be brought under control. So it was looking to go from Newark, East Orange, Orange, West Orange. That was the proposed route, and it was going to end at Northfield Avenue in West Orange. That's a picture of Northfield Avenue there on the right side. It started as Highway 25A, as I had mentioned, And then in 1953, it was renamed New Jersey Route 58 under the old highway numbering system. And it eventually, in 1956, the President Eisenhower provided funding to build a interstate highway system. And it might be worth mentioning that President Eisenhower, of course, before he was president, he was General Eisenhower, Supreme Commander during World War II. And Eisenhower had brought home with him from Europe the concept of an interstate highway system because he saw how beneficial it could be in Germany. He saw how the Germans had built the Autobahn system, and Eisenhower felt that it was important for us to have a similar system here in the United States. In 1957, it officially received the designation of I-280, but there were no route designations as of yet. But you could say 1957 is when 280 was born. And of course, it was always interesting that it actually took you to Route 80. And, you know, as a kid growing up, we always thought that that was cool because that's why it was named 280. When in reality, any connecting highway to a major highway, and there's plenty examples around the country, is usually a 3-digit designation. It's not advancing here. Oh, I'm sorry. Bear with me a moment. So almost from the beginning, they encountered some difficulties. And this is a New York Times article from 1958. And one of the difficulties centered around that through the Oranges, specifically in East Orange, they wanted to build a elevated highway through East Orange rather than a depressed highway. And 4 mayors, the mayors of Orange, West Orange, Newark, and East Orange, they got together and they demanded that it be a depressed highway through the Oranges. The elevated highway was opposed, as I mentioned, by 4 mayors, including West Orange Mayor James Sheeran. And the New Jersey State DOT claimed that the cost to depress the highway would be prohibitive. So anything, the thing that really could be the biggest takeaway of this, these first obstacles here, was that a freeway will not be free. That there were going to be many costs associated with that. And of course, costs were anticipated, but the battle began as to where the highway would go, below grade or above grade. East Orange led the way. Here's a picture of Garden State Parkway looking north. East Orange, when the parkway came through East Orange, they had fought for a depressed roadway, and now they were kind of confronted with a similar situation with 280 coming through. In fact, the city of East Orange produced a movie, We'll Take the Low Road, because as I mentioned, they were fighting for a depressed highway. They did not want an elevated highway through their city. Another article from the New York Times, 1959, it talked about people turning out in opposition of an elevated plan for the new freeway. It was ultimately decided and reported in 1961 that the proposed east-west freeway would bisect Essex County, but it would pass under the Garden State Parkway. And so the battle was kind of won for a depressed roadway. And it was only at that point a 7.3-mile long freeway. Of course, it received its designation for 280 in 1957. Here is what interchange 145, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's where the Garden State Parkway intersects 280. This has since changed from then, from that time, but this is what it originally looked like. But the battle was won that the east-west freeway, known as 280, would go under the Garden State Parkway. By 1964, the newspapers was reporting, and you can see here the swath of land that was going to be needed to complete construction through the Oranges. I think it says somewhere in this article that 158 houses were destroyed, and I think it was actually even more than that. You can see the route indicated by the red line, and you can see some streets there in orange, some familiar names. And this article, also 1964, is where the first mention that I could find for a proposal for a tunnel through the First Mountain, West Orange, pops up. And this would have been a less expensive plan rather than an open cut. And I'll have some more information on that in a few slides. Through the oranges, there were 8 roadway overpasses and one railroad overpass. And that, of course, is the Lackawanna Railroad through the oranges. And here's a great slide, speaking of slides, from the 1970s. And of course, this is New Jersey Transit today. This is South Jefferson Street over here, just for point of reference. Newark Sunday News, July 1964, starts the report on the route of the East-West Freeway. And it says that highway engineers for many years, as far back as the late 1920s, they wanted a new east-west route to be known as Route 10. Now, we all know Route 10 is a state highway, but interestingly, and perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier, when the original concept for East-West Freeway was mentioned in came to light in 1939, the federal government actually wanted to use the existing Route 3 corridor for the new east-west route. Now, if you've ever traveled Route 3, it's a congested highway in itself, and there's been some recent changes to it in the last decade. But the New Jersey State DOT deemed it as not wide enough for federal standards, and therefore that was never considered. The freeway goes over the First Mountain. Now, this, if you travel 280 coming through West Orange, you will know that you go over the First Mountain there, and it was an incredible engineering undertaking. And there's 3 key points to the rock cut. The highway engineers had to go 120 feet, and it was believed to be the deepest rock cut this side of the Mississippi River. And they thought a 6% grade for the highway on the east side and a 5% grade on the west side. Now, that's a pretty steep grade. And almost since the beginning, when 280 opened, there's always been accidents, and because of the grade, most likely. And even veteran surveyors said it was among one of the toughest terrains that they had to scale. Here you can see a view of 1957 downtown West Orange, and I filled some streets in here for reference, so you can see West Orange Town Hall, 2 main roads, Northfield Avenue, Mount Pleasant Avenue, and this was the proposed route of 280. And you can see all those houses and residences that lied in the way. And these properties had to be obtained. So notices went out from the state that they were going to buy the houses at market value. And this is dated 1961. And I still talk to people, and even today when they knew I was coming on this evening, that many families are still deeply hurt by the fact that they lost their houses for the construction of the highway. This is 1967. This is 10 years later. You can see in the upper portion of the photograph some of the land that already has been cleared. And one of the problems was that the land was cleared, the houses were gone, but there was no construction going on. All these ratables had been lost. And this actually generated a lawsuit. Here you can see even a better view of the picture. I believe it was East Orange, Orange, and West Orange got together because they wanted to get the state to begin construction after all this property had been obtained and purchased, and nothing was going on here. For reference, this is Northfield Avenue, and that's Mount Pleasant Avenue. And that was the eventual construction of 280. On the right side over here, you can see the that's actually the beginning of the first side cut. And I didn't realize I had a red dot, but that's what it looked like. And this was the deepest cut. That's going to be the 120-foot cut through the second mountain there. And you can see that Llewellyn Park, the area to the right, it seemed to me that they did their best to avoid disturbing Llewellyn Park at all, and they just went through basically a section of Llewellyn Park where there was no houses and very little disruption. This profile shows the 6% grade as opposed. That's Mount Pleasant Avenue. That's Pleasant Valley Way, and this is what the West Orange Mayor Sheeran wanted. He wanted a tunnel through the mountain, and it would only been a 2% grade, which would have been much safer. Now, Mayor Sheeran was a veteran, a decorated veteran, I should note, of World War II, and Mayor Sheeran was actually very visionary in his concept for a tunnel through the mountain because he believed that West Orange could retain the land above the tunnel for taxable purposes, taxable ratables. And he also believed that the tunnel could be used as an emergency shelter if needed during the height of the Cold War. Of course, the tunnel concept was deemed too expensive, and the yellow line indicates the 6% grade, and that was how it was built. And this is a profile looking at the deep rock cut, and there was 1.5 million cubic yards of road, rock and dirt in the way, and that all had to come out. And so that was one of the engineering feats that remained in front of the construction. Now, these signs, I'm sure you've all seen them, your highway taxes at work. But in the 1960s, I can remember one of these signs, someone took some poetic license, you might say, with it, and they removed the way, and this sign appeared in local papers, your high taxes at work. And that certainly was true to some degree and still is today. When construction began on the top of the first mountain, they used, well, first it was just digging by conventional means, just moving dirt around. And this is, I believe that's a house on Llewellyn Park that's now on top of the hill there. But it really wasn't so much affected by the construction. But as construction progressed, the company used Ingersoll Rand, what was called crawl drills. And these basically were drills that could be maneuvered into place. They used, you can see the air compressors to the right side, and they were powered by the air compressors, and they would dig down. There were 10 crawl drills, and they could produce 4,000 yards of rock a day with no delays. Now, of course, this was a sales pitch, but I'm sure there was some truth to that, and helped keep on schedule. Here you can see a picture of the crawl drills in action. And this was an ad that appeared in Trade Journal from Ingersoll Rand. And of course, they used the 280 construction as a selling point for the crawl drills. And if you drive along 280 today, you can still, don't take your eyes off the road. The road is dangerous enough, but if you're a passenger in a vehicle, you can still see some of these marks in the rock. And these were as a result of the crawl drills drilling down into the rock to put explosives in there to remove the rock. Here you can see an aerial view of progress taking shape. Trees have been removed. The highway is starting to take form. This is Prospect Avenue, so in West Orange, so we're looking east. Essex Green, if you're familiar with the area, is in the lower right-hand corner. And the red arrow indicates the direction that it's going towards Orange, East Orange, Newark. This is on Prospect Avenue in West Orange. I actually remember this, traveling on Prospect Avenue as a young boy with my family and seeing all this construction and just like wondering what the heck is going on. Here's an aerial view. Essex Green is at the top. This is Llewellyn Park, and this is 280. So one of the problems that was confronted with the engineers was in Morris County, there was low-lying areas, and they needed to build up the roadway bed So the sign says entering Township of East Hanover, but it really should say entering Township of West Orange, even though it's in Morris County. And here's why. When the rock was moved from West Orange and it was transported west, it went to East Hanover to fill in the low-lying areas along the Hatfield Swamp to raise the roadbed. Now, some problems arose from this method is that a completion deadline in 1971 was fast approaching. They had many delays with funding, and but they wanted to abide by the schedule of getting this done quickly. But trucks could only run on a limited basis over the neighborhood streets, and there were high maintenance costs. I believe tires, frequent tire replacements were part of the problem with running these trucks. So a solution had to be a solution came up to build a railroad. Now that may seem like a crazy solution in highway construction, but they actually had S.J. Groves, who was the principal contractor, was responsible for the section seen in blue, and they were running trucks over the existing highway, but for the reasons mentioned, it kind of proved to be impractical. So they actually a decision was made to build the railroad along the route of 280, and it was featured in this issue of Railway Age from November 10th, 1969, and showed a lot of the pictures of the highway under construction. And it was it was determined by I think I have it coming up here. There was actually a feasibility study done, and it was I forget the name of the contractor, might have it, but the contractor indicated that this would be the best way to effectively construct the railroad, and they can move 35 cubic yards of rock and dirt a day, and there would be cars divided into 3 trains with 8 cars each. And the plan was to have 1 train in the loading zone, 1 train in the dump zone, and 1 train in transit at all time. And here we go. The temporary railroad was constructed by Railcon Corporation of Plainfield, and they used prefabricated rail panels, much like assembling a model railroad. They bought them prefabricated on site, and it was constructed. And they were delivered on flatbed truck and hoisted into position by crane. So the construction of the railroad came very quickly. Here you can see, and this is from the magazine article, you can see the rail sections being brought to the site and being laid into position by workers. These are just some random shots of the construction of the railroad. This shot here is looking west. This is near the Eisenhower Parkway interchange. 2 General Electric U-33 diesel locomotives were ordered, and they were ordered by S.J. Groves, and they came in over the Roseland. They came in Roseland onto the railroad, and I believe that these came out of the factory, the General Electric factory, just in time before a national rail strike hit. And otherwise they would have been delayed in getting to the site and would have further delayed the construction of 280. And eventually a 3rd engine, an Alco RS2, was purchased to help some of the trains over the mountains. The rail cars were specially designed rail cars where the load can be loaded in the top, and the side of the car would open. The door would swing open, and it could be dumped onto the ground. These were specialized dump cars, and in later years, they got some more from Eagle Pitcher. I believe this was a mine out west someplace where they got these cars on lease or purchased, and they reused them in the construction. I also might point out that the trains were operated by S.J. Grove employees, not railroad engineers, and that also caused some fuss with the railroad because they wanted engineers, but S.J. Groves, they had nothing of that, and they used their own employees to operate. Now, in this particular picture, you can see here in the foreground the reinforcement that was used, and this was used under the tracks as the trains would pass over existing overpasses. They thought that there might be a problem with the weight of the trains, and they wanted to make sure that there was no collapse. This is the Laurel Avenue in construction in the background there. You can see the train coming, a loaded train heading towards Morris County. Here's another picture, and you can see the reinforcement on the roadway, on the bridge there, just to provide additional support so that there was no collapse with the train. I believe this is Essex. I'm sorry, we'll go back to that slide. Here you can see the rock cuts starting to take place. Essex Green, the shopping plaza, is on the upper left there, and that's the interchange with Prospect Avenue that we see under construction. Here's a closer look at the route of 280 through West Orange and the roads that it affected. At Valley Road and Winghamton Place, there was a special problem, and that problem was that Jenkins Playground, which happened to be the first playground in West Orange, actually stood in the path of 280, as did West Orange Fire Headquarters was also in the way there. So both the fire headquarters had to be demolished and moved, and as a result, Jenkins Playground was reduced to a fraction of its original size, and Jenkins Playground is still there. Fire headquarters is still there as well, having been moved, and 280 was able to come through. And of course, there was state mandate. There was nothing that could be done. This is a view of that area today. Here you can see some of the massive stone and dirt and rock that was coming off of the mountain. Here you can see the train passing, one of the trains passing through. The train is empty. It's coming back from Morris County, and it's going back for another load. This is the Laurel Avenue exit. You can see the overpass has been completed. And this is the Alco engine. As I said, this was usually used to help the two General Electric units. It's one of my favorite pictures here. You can really see the highway starting to take place and the rock heading west towards Morris County. This is just east of Prospect Avenue. This is a staging area, but you can see looking east that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to get the highway down the mountain and through the oranges. This is a view of the Prospect Avenue overpass, and you can get a better look at the cars, the special cars, the dump cars, the train. Another picture in the Prospect Avenue area, as is this one. As I mentioned, it was 1.5 million cubic yards of rock and dirt that had to come out there. And, just to make that disappear the way it did, it was all done by the temporary railroad. It started with trucks, but, the trucks just weren't going to work out for many reasons. So railroad proved to be the most plausible, most reasonable means of getting it done. By the fall in 1972, the Star Ledger is reporting that the East-West Freeway it's under construction, but it actually was nearly completed, but not open. Many people from West Orange, including myself, they can tell you stories of sneaking onto the highway, riding their car to Livingston. Just getting on the highway. It wasn't opened. It just kind of remained. It was there, but just not open, but certainly ready for use. Finally, in I believe it was 1972. I have the date coming up here. Opening ceremonies were planned. There was a whole program that was issued. I have a copy of this program in my archives. from June 22nd, 1973. And of course, the program was listed full of all the politicians, that came forward and taking credit for it. The mayor of West Orange was listed on there, and on the back of the program, at the very bottom is mention of the contractor S.J. Groves and Sons. I believe they were out of Minneapolis. I think they're actually still in business. William T. Cahill was governor of New Jersey at that time, and there's actually a movie, a brief movie here, and I believe that's either Cahill or he's in that crowd. And what he did is he inserted a ceremonial key into the 280 sign, declaring the 280 open in the oranges. At the end, eventually it became a 17.5-mile roadway, connects to I-80. And something that always interests me is that where it began crossing the Passaic River in Newark, it actually crosses over the Passaic River again as you enter into Morris County. The Passaic River, of course, divides Morris and Essex County. On the left side of the screen here, you can see 280 in West Orange, obviously an aerial view. There were 2 full interchanges, 2 partial interchanges, and 2 overpasses in West Orange. You can add a little clarity to this photograph. So I guess the 280 epilogue would be that, it has changed. It has changed the landscape forever. There's certainly benefits to interstate travel, 280. We use it every day. I'm on the road every day. I couldn't imagine life without it. Of course, it's not without problems. No highway is. But having grown up in West Orange, having witnessed the construction of 280, even today, all these years later, I drive across and I think back to the time when we drove or when we rode our bicycles on the highway. Here's a look at the final numbers of what 280. It was 25 years of planning, 10 years of construction. That doesn't even mention all the delays and the funding issues that they ran into along the way. And considering that, it's surprised that they actually got it completed in 10 years. It was reported to be $186 million in expenses. I actually think it's higher than that, but that's the number that's generally accepted as what the cost was. And Interstate 280 opened on Friday, June 22nd, 1973, and it was a motorcade in West Orange. I believe that went from Pleasant Valley Way east to Mount Pleasant Avenue and turned around and came back, but the highway was officially open that day. It wasn't completed all the way to Kearny at that time. I'm not exactly sure when that happened, but that happened at some point after. It's always kind of been a work in progress. So it was 4 million cubic yards in total. I have my email address listed at the bottom of the screen, jfagan@westorange.org. If you have any questions or anything that you want to send me, that's the email to reach me at. And I'd like to, thank you for attending this evening. And I'd like to open the floor to questions and answers. And I mentioned to Richie before the presentation, the best questions are the ones that I know the answers to. So, Richie, do you have anything in the chat there? And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. First off, thank you so much for the presentation. That was very informative. And I know a lot of our members enjoyed it. We topped out at about 120 attendees. So it was a well-received and very interesting presentation overall.
Well, thank you very much. I seen somebody in the chat there said that they wish they would have built the tunnel. If I may expand upon that for a moment, it was a 6% grade without the tunnel. It would have been a 2% grade with the tunnel. And I think I mentioned that from the first day it opened, or from the first winter of that 6% grade, and all subsequent winters, it doesn't even have to be winter, but that 6% grade over the first mountain, second mountain, has always been a problem. There's no question about it that the tunnel would have been a better choice, but it just never happened.
There were a few questions that came in. Not sure if you know all the answers, but we'll take a crack at it. So question from Alan Furler, is the maximum grade on the temporary railroad known?
Well, the grade of the railroad, my understanding of it is it basically followed the existing grade of the highway because the sections of the highway obviously weren't completed, but the grading had been done. So there was no special grading that I'm aware of that went in for the railroad. The railroad was basically just built at grade in pre-existing conditions on the highway. And as I mentioned, they had those two GE locomotives, and they were able to do the job. But in later years, they bought in the Alco to help along the way.
Okay. Another question. Someone had heard that Becker's Farm in Roseland, which the highway partially obliterated, applied to have a highway overpasses built for the miniature Centerville and Southwestern Railroad, which was in the way. Their application was rejected. Is there any truth to that?
I can't speak to that because the short answer would be I don't know. Becker's Farm, I loved Becker's Farm. I loved that miniature railroad at Becker's Farm. It's some of my fondest childhood memories. Yes, and it is true, 280 passed right through there, right by there. I'm sure there was a lot of complaints along the route. Everybody wanted something done to save or preserve. And if anything could have been done, certainly Becker's Farm would have been worthy of it. But Becker's Farm, like so many things, have just faded into oblivion and only lives in a nostalgic sense for those of us that remember it today.
Question from Barry. How long, I guess in mileage, is the run from West Orange to Parsippany?
Well, let's see. It depends if the police are chasing me or not. But in reality, from West Orange, from Prospect Avenue to Parsippany, you're probably talking. Well, Parsippany is actually on I-80. From West Orange to the end of 280, it's probably about 7 miles. If you go from the orange border, say South Jefferson Street, heading west, it's under 10 miles, maybe 9.5, 10 miles from West Orange to the end of 280, and then to the interchange with Interstate 80. As a matter of fact, when you're traveling 280 west, you have a familiar sign there that says end 280, begin 80.
Somewhat of a related question. How long, I guess in mileage, was the temporary railroad?
Well, the railroad would have, I don't know the exact answer to that, but the railroad would have ended in somewhere in East Hanover, probably by the New Road interchange, and it went as far east as by Mount Pleasant Avenue, just east of the First Mountain. So you were probably looking at a railroad of total in length, maybe 8 miles, 7, 8 miles. And as a kid, I always loved trains, and so when I seen this railroad on 280, now I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I loved the fact that there's going to be another railroad in West Orange. And I can remember seeing trains in operation, never knowing what the schedule was, never even knowing what the purpose was. But as I mentioned, I just loved seeing the fact that there was trains in West Orange. So to answer that question, it was probably about a 7 to 8 mile railroad line.
Next question from Bradford. Why is there an Interstate 280 in New Jersey and another one in California?
Again, I don't know that 280. There's the interstate, the numbering for the interstate highway system is interesting, and there's always exceptions to the rule. All east-west routes end in even numbers. All north-south routes end in odd numbers. And as you go towards the northern part of the United States, the major east-west routes kind of are numbered consecutively, and anything with a three number designation is usually a connecting road. 280 is one of them. I can give you another example. One you might be familiar with, Richie, is off of 80. There's 380. Just past Tannersville there that goes north to Scranton and Steamtown. But there's many examples of the 3-digit roads. And so, you know what? They might have ran out of numbers, or knowing the federal government, they might have forgot that they had a 280 on the East Coast and probably figured, you know what? There's 3,000 miles. No one's going to really be confused by it.
Bu- 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 bu. Just some combing through here. Just some general comments. Someone wrote that 280 through Harrison and Kearny opened sometime in 1981.
That sounds about right. And right and actually right by Orange Street there. If you're traveling, I guess west on Orange Street, if you go past the intersection there of Orange Street, there's like what I call the secret entrance onto 280. You just kind of make a left and you can jump right on 280. And when you do that, you can kind of see that there's some uncompleted roads there. It's a highway. It might have been part of the I-20, the 25 or 53 that just never got completed, and they never really knew what to do with it. And that's just kind of the way it all ended up. And also at that location there, before the Stickle Bridge by Orange Street, that's the Mars Canal. Of course, it's no longer there, but the New Jersey Transit, the trolley line that goes to Branch Brook Park there, Mars Canal was right along there. So yeah, 280. The history of 280 is certainly an important transportation history, but equally fascinating to me anyway is all the ancillary transportation routes along the way that intersect that are no longer there.
Mm. Just some other general comments that came in. Some folks had memories of their own. Michael Polardi said, "I remember before they poured the concrete, the water trucks used to spread water to keep the dust down. They used to fill up at the hydrant in the corner of Lincoln Ave and PVW."
Well, Michael Polardi actually is a West Orange resident. I know Michael, and he's absolutely right. And I'm glad he brought that up because I did forget that. When you get old, you forget things. But yeah, I mean, there was so much dust associated with the construction, and especially in that area by Pleasant Valley Way that he's referring to, that you needed to keep the dust down at some point, and spraying water helped that. But there was also a lot of guys I went to school with who would ride their dirt bikes on the uncompleted 280. Mike Polardi might have even been one of those guys, and that also created a lot of dust. But it was a fun, it was an adventurous time. No one really knew what the future meant with this highway. Today we travel along the highway. Obviously, we have cell phones, but there was a time when there was a call box on 280 at every half mile through West Orange. So if your car broke down, you would be able to go to the call box and call for help.
A note from Barry Levitt, who's one of our members. He said he had cab rides in 1971 on the construction railroads. Employees were always letting me ride on loaders and watching the dump cars dump.
That would be cool. Too bad he didn't have the foresight to take some pictures or videos of it, because it would be really great to see some of that stuff today. I mean, we have photographs of it, certainly. And by the way, if Tri-State is interested in any of the photos, I'd be glad to contribute copies of them to the archives.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. A question from Bob Bars. Was the main depth of the highway was achieved before the railroad was built, and then after that the railroad only carried rock for widening the highway? That's his question.
Well, the railroad probably started slightly west of Prospect Avenue, because the Prospect Avenue was basically the summit of the First Mountain. So as those crawl drills began to drill down and began to lower the elevation towards achieving that 120-foot rock cut. Obviously, they couldn't have the railroad there. So the railroad probably began west of Prospect Avenue, and as work progressed on the deep rock cut, then they can move the railroad east towards Mount Pleasant Avenue to get in the rock cut. And you've seen in some of those photographs, workers' trucks, Ford pickup truck, as I recall. Obviously, that didn't move any of the rocks, but that was for the workers to get in there. So it probably started west of Prospect Avenue, and then as conditions permitted, it moved east towards Mount Pleasant Avenue.
Cool, thank you. There's actually another question, which I actually know the answer to. There's a question, were the engines and the side dump cars brought onto Route 280 via a temporary connection with the Morristown and Erie and Roseland? And I just answered
Yeah,
that.
that's correct. They came across, I forgot that was the Morristown Erie, but yeah, they came across, I believe that's Buford Avenue. Well, I don't think there's it's not a coal, there was a coal company there at one point, but yeah, they came across Buford Avenue there and they made the connection up onto 280. And if you know where to look, you can still kind of see the remnants, not so much of the rail connection, but where it was to get the equipment onto up onto the railroad on 280. Yeah, all that equipment and those engines, they had to come through Morristown and from points further west and to get to that point to 280. Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Rudy Garbley, wrote a book on the Morristown and Erie, and there's some pictures of them moving the equipment over that connection. And I don't remember if it was when they delivered this stuff or when it came back off the highway. Like part of the train got loose and like ran down the hill, and they had a bit of a mess to clean up.
I could imagine. As I did mention, those two GE engines were the last out of the factory before there was a major. I want to say a strike, but I'm not sure if strike was the right classification. But they were lucky to get them out of the factory and get them over to SJ Groves on 280 before there was a major rail disruption.
Yeah.
So they got them, and they were able to put them immediately to work.
Yeah, I also know that when the railroad was on the highway, they disconnected the tracks from the Morristown and Erie, so it wouldn't be subject to federal regulation.
That's a good point. I actually knew that, but forgot it. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so that way it was a completely independent railroad.
Yeah, insular.
There was no connection whatsoever until need be.
And I know the one locomotive, the Alco, still exists at the Illinois Railway Museum now.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, it's in there. I actually saw it a couple years ago. It's inside one of their sheds.
Does it still have the S.J. Groves paint scheme on there?
I think it was. I don't remember. It may have been repainted for a subsequent owner. But that is the end of the questions. Joe, I really do appreciate it. On behalf of the Tri-State Railway Historical Society, your presentation was extremely well received based on all the comments that came in. We did record the presentation, so we will make it available on our channel in the next few days.
I'm not responsible if the screen cracks, if anybody's watching it. But no, thank you so much, Richie. I'm glad that we were able to finally work out this date. And I apologize in advance for a few faux pas there in the presentation. Sometimes, as you may know, you got the PowerPoint presentation on, you got the Zoom box, and it's kind of hard to see some of the stuff on there. But yeah, it was a great pleasure to prepare and a great pleasure, equally great pleasure to present tonight.
Yeah, glad we were able to make it happen, and thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. And to you and your family and everyone watching, happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I can be of any assistance going forward, please reach out.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good night, everybody, and
Good night.
we'll see you in the January meeting.